Today we're talking about a fun topic out there, guys, that being the fall of FaZe Clan and then the rise again of FaZe Clan. It's actually Nadeshot on the Colin and Samir show, a great episode. Go watch it out, nearly 2 hours long, and a lot of great topics they dive in on, one of which is esports organizations. And I have a killer question for all of you guys. What is the most OG esports team that you know about? That is what sparks this conversation as Nadeshot responds. FaZe, Optic, TSM. Myself personally, from the Counter-Strike days, I would throw in SK or Complexity. But I think in the context of this question, what is the most OG esports team to really make a name for themselves and start the blow up of esports? Of which I would say the TSM, Optic, FaZe are really, really good answers. But what would you guys say? But Nadeshot has also asked, where did FaZe Clan go wrong? And he kind of goes through a tremendous storyline that is FaZe that even I kind of forgot about.
FaZe, the first to kind of bring personality into this world?
No.
No?
No, I don't even know if you can pinpoint. FaZe and Optic, and we all just came up with YouTube at the same time. Like, I wouldn't, the way we talk is like gaming and YouTube creators are so separate, but they were like one and the same. And all the creators, I don't know where personality necessarily started, but if you're talking from where we come from, it's Optic, FaZe, TSM started to do it a little bit like with League of Legends, and that's when that organization really was king made as like one of the biggest in the US because they did a team house and they produced a series around it. But I'd say like the early 2010s were Optic and FaZe and, you know, TSM, but it was at the same trajectory as like gaming and, you know, whatever, beauty, fucking vloggers on YouTube. We all really, it was at the same timeline. Yeah, so what I think FaZe has always done really well, it wasn't until like the Fortnite era where FaZe like felt like they were as relevant as they once were a few years back with Call of Duty. They signed the right guys at the right time, and they kind of hit a gold mine with Cloaksy and Tfue, and who else was on FaZe at the time before like Mongrel and all these guys joined, or whatever the fuck. But they kind of had a reawakening from Fortnite because Call of Duty was kind of in a lull. Optic was always not, Optic became bigger from like a competitive aspect and on YouTube, but FaZe was still, they had more people following them than Optic ever did. But if you were in the community, you liked Optic more than FaZe in most cases. And then when Fortnite came out after, you know, Call of Duty kind of reached its ceiling with how big it would be, they just got into it at the right time and they exploded again.
And here was a point where I was like, oh my, he's actually really right. At least from when I was at in the esports scene 5 to 6 years ago, before the peak of Fortnite, then you look back and think, wow, FaZe Clan really did re-blow up. They did all the things they did with Call of Duty, all of their team houses, especially in New York. You could even reference their LA houses where they were still very much relevant. And then you think about peak Fortnite, they really did a great job at re-expanding themselves, right? All of the signings they made in the Fortnite scene were incredible. They were all very well timed, especially at the World Cup. And you think about the Tfues and the Cloaksies, you think about the High Skies and so many other names during that era where I was like, wow, they really utilized a trending game to kind of hop back in to being the FaZe we once knew. And then I was like, it's really cyclical with FaZe, right? What they once were with Call of Duty, then Fortnite, and now with IRL. I thought that was a very good point made by Nate.
And so FaZe came into this newfound relevancy that they haven't had. And now they've been able to do it a couple times over, especially with how big IRL streaming feels right now. But the biggest problem that they had was just raising capital and giving the business to folks that don't know fucking anything about the gaming space and the nuances of it. There's so many people that are like that, but some are better than others. And I'm not saying all the people and fine folks at FaZe were bad at what they did or had the wrong intentions, but they've had multiple different groups of leadership. And the FaZe guys, I think, in a lot of ways, kind of turned into what I feel like, where they were living in this house in New York, and it was literally them just trying to get out of their parents' basement house and make something of themselves. And then they were getting tens of millions of views every single month on years of YouTube. And that adds up. Like, you make some good money from it. Then they moved out to fucking Orange County, lived in Newport, same neighborhood Kobe lived. And it's not that I think they got complacent. I think more than anything, they were probably burnt out. And then FaZe was now on autopilot being ran by, you know, suits and executives that were really trying to create value for FaZe so that they could have an exit and make a lot of money from it. but those decisions never lined up with the decisions that FaZe would ever make if they were put in the same shoes. But it's a catch-22 because they didn't want to fucking do any of that shit.
But where they went wrong, and this is kind of obvious by now, but hearing Nadeshot's perspective on it was interesting because a lot of people have been infused with that investment capital he talks about. But the OG FaZe, when they blew up, they take on that capital. They try to expand to these C-class businessmen who, unfortunately, in Nadeshot's words, and we all know, they gave away the company. They gave away some of their power. And by the end of the day, they were so burnt out, they weren't willing to do the work necessary underneath all of those businessmen who were also making way too much to make it work. And so we see a bit of a collapse and now a going up of what FaZe should have been from the start, right? A slim team of content creators trying to make it. And they're doing it all over again.
But the FaZe guys like the executives needed the creators to like buy into it some way, somehow. So they kind of turned it into just like a transactional business where they took on the new creators that were popular in Fortnite, kind of put the entire business on their shoulders. The OGs that were there from the start didn't really have anything to do with it anymore. And so you just had this buildup of fucking exhaustion and anger on both sides and resentment because they just would never make the same decisions, but they don't want to do the dirty work.
Let me ask you a question. Is esports and our esports teams venture backable at the scale that you guys have been backed? Because are those two things at odds, right? Like when you take on venture money, the expectations are very different.
I would never do that again if I were writing checks myself in this current age of where the esports business actually is. Just because and that's why I appreciate all the conversations and all the rounds of funding that we've gone through, is that we weren't telling and selling them this dream that we were going to have $1 billion exit in 5 years. And there was certainly a focus to have an exit at some point in the near future, but we told them that this is going to take a long time.
For me, this whole discussion has made me think of what the future of esports orgs are going to be, because we now have our select few that have made it, right? You can name 10 to 20 esports teams now that have solidified their names in a space. And I wonder if we're ever going to go back to the roots of seeing a team out there, as Nadeshot said, make it out of the basement. I feel like we've almost moved past that step, and I have to find a way to make it back to those kind of storylines. And maybe that's the next generation of streamers who also become esports players and gamers. But we've almost moved past the whole out of the basement mantra. I guess when an esports pro is signed, you've kind of made it out of the basement. But we're kind of past the whole like, oh, esports gamers are broke. You know, a lot of them are still making decent money once you've made it. And so I wonder how we go back to those kind of grassroots days and what the next phase, Optic, TSM, Cloud9, Liquid, is going to look like. And I'll be here to cover it. I think one last yap, talking way too much for all of you, as I look towards the younger gamers out there. We got someone like Lil Fredson, 11, 12 years old in the Apex scene, who is one of the youngest to ever reach top rank there, now trying out games like Counter-Strike. We have 12-year-old Thunder Meow, who at 10 years old was the max rank in Apex, and now he is the first ever in North America, or the youngest ever in North America, to reach Radiant. I think that's the next generation, but there's got to be more than that. So what do you guys think? I've talked way too much. Please take care of yourselves. Sip up for me, all right? Any kind of liquids, and we'll see you back here tomorrow. Take care.